Hello and welcome to another episode of But Have You Heard About? I'm your host, Courtney. Today I'm joined again by my friend Trisha.
Hello.
And we are on a fact-finding historical fun time mission today. It's not fun. It's actually pretty depressing. However, this came up because Trisha watched an episode of Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. And I think anytime you have a show that has the ability to bring in real things happening, they definitely do. And it also brings in the idea of, was this all that it is, or is there so much more? And in the episode you watched by Doctor Who, I talked about the Partition of India, mm-hmm. which for those that don't know, Partition of India basically happened when Britain was like, deuces, gonna leave. And basically this land that they had controlled for 300 years, split it up based off of an outdated census, as well as unuseful information, and didn't tell anybody until their troops had left India what the plan was. So India gained independence. 2 days later, they released this map. So we got to get some factual stuff first, though, or at least some history, so you at least understand where this is coming from. So the British Raj, which is a nomenclature fun word for the rule of British Crown and the Indian subcontinent. This is also called direct rule of India. And the Crown rule, this happened from 1858 to 1947, which was 2 years after World War II. Before 1858, when it became officially part of British control, it was part of the British East India Company. And starting even in the 12th century, you had other countries and other ethnicities that were invading India and its lands. 12th century, you have the Turks. They called them the Turks. They didn't say it was Muslims that were coming in to this predominantly Hindu area. It's the Turks because they went off ethnicity. This is important for later on. I totally promise.
Well, that's probably all you had is visual cues of who these invaders are.
But it also goes to show that religion wasn't as important in the area, but it will be when the partition happens. So about the 1500s, you have colonialism going strong. We've got the British coming over to America. We got Spain doing stupid shit. We've got the pre-start of raping Africa for diamonds with Belgium and those in the Congo, all the fun shit. You have the British East India Trading Company coming in and starting this little taking over of these princely states in India. So
I like princely states.
Princely states means that they had a ruler. They had someone who, it's a prince. You have a prince of this area. So European history. Germany was not always Germany, right? You had a whole bunch of little
I'm digging into that right now in the book series that I'm in, and Bavaria and the whole.
Yes. So you have different. Yes.
The Kaisers.
Yeah. So you had all these different little areas that were ruled by these princes in India. Mm-hmm. A lot of these areas, I roughly would say, looking at a map when it was showing these princely areas, you probably had almost 100, 75 to 100. And the area of India, which would be Pakistan, India, Bangladesh.
Yes.
So all of that, about 100 different ones.
I like it. That helps me really make sense of this because I'm just now getting into that piece and that's
it's a good analogy
comparison
for, let's just be honest, us white people who definitely got the European history, but not everybody else, not everything else around the world. So you have all these different princelies. They have, while they all may look similar to their neighbors, they have different traditions. They have different customs. While they may be predominantly Buddhist in that area, they're still going to have people that are Muslim. And they're still going to have people that are Hindu, but the majority is probably Buddhist. They're probably ruled by somebody who follows Buddhism or is very a good proponent of Buddhism, or, vice versa. You have someone who's Hindu or Muslim that's leading, or even Sikh that's leading that princely area, the principality.
There hasn't been a big shift in land ownership.
No.
It's families passing the same stuff down.
Yep.
Forever.
Yes. So you have different principalities, right? So they're going to probably marry each other. So hundreds of years probably happening. I'm not an expert in Indian history whatsoever. I'm just an expert in reading things and using fun stuff. So I talk about it. So when the British East India Company starts coming into India, they're like, hey, we're going to just come in, take your shit. Sucks to be you. And when they take over those nomad lands that really didn't have anyone designated as the ruler, no big deal. Those nomads.
Easy to take stuff and no one's arguing with you.
Yeah, settlers were just shit, I guess. Okay, fuck. Sounds good. And then the principals, those little princely states, were then basically let to continue to rule. However, they had to follow whatever the British monarchy passed down. So whomever was the viceroy of India at that time, who was kind of like, let's say, like the left hand of the parliament or the queen, whomever was that wanted to be, or the king that was like, hey, we're going to have X, Y, and Z done. The viceroy of India basically was like, yo, got that shit. I'll take care of it. They were in charge of India. Okay. They were the parliament head. So like a president of that area. Unelected president.
So the Brits weren't really interfering in each
in each region. So in each little region, they would impose certain things.
But it was the same people that have been telling them what to do forever anyway.
Yep. So when you're having, like, let's say that we pass a law in the U.S., your governor then is the one saying, hey, we're going to do this, X, Y, and Z. We always follow what the governor says.
And you may not realize who was pulling the strings.
Yes. I mean, they understood. And so if it was a law or something that, they didn't like, of course they'd be like, the British told us we have to do this. But here's the thing. Before 1858, or even like a little before that, because, Britain had started taking over a little bit, or at least the British East India Trading Company started taking over beforehand. They were like, hey, yeah, no, you guys, we see that you have different religions here, but we see a lot more Hindu. So we're going to call them the majority. And we're going to praise them more. We are going to say they basically kind of created a caste system of religions. Okay. And said no matter what, basically Hindu is majority. All right. Which is,
I mean, it's not a terrible reason to do it if they really felt that that's what they were seeing represented. It's not like they had like kickbacks or that I know of. Like there was a reason for that. They were getting anything out there.
Yeah. But before Britain came in, you had a huge amount of different, like I would say popular religions that we have still currently. You had Sikhs, you had Buddhists, you had Muslims, you had Hindus, Buddhists, did I say Buddhists? Buddhists again. Christians, and you also had Jews that all lived in India. They may not have been 100% in harmony. They're about 85%. So 85% harmony when Britain starts taking over, that harmony starts going away because Britain's like, no. They are creating these like walls.
Yes.
And this ideology that if you are Hindu, you are better than.
Or you need to go be with your people.
You need to be
out here.
Yeah, well, not even that, because they were still like, yeah, you should live where you want to live. Because Britain kept the rule. They, even though you had these princely states that had rulers, Britain would come in, squash revolts. They passed a lot of laws. Like they had elections of like certain things, but if you were Hindu, you could only vote for your Hindu representatives. Same thing with people that were Muslim. And they also included the Sikhs with the Hindus, I believe.
That would have been a nightmare to like try to do the logistics of that.
But if it's all local,
living everywhere.
But it's local, like so in your hometown, which India, while it was big, like Delhi was a large city, it was not as huge as it is now, and we'll talk about why.
Okay, sure, all right.
Yeah,
to get the population increase.
Yeah. So you're over here voting. You can only vote in your religion, and they would always make it, even with their censuses, they didn't, with the censi? Censuses? That's a fun word. With the multiple censuses that were conducted, they didn't really let those, like how we have like our census in the U.S. and we go, hey, this state is going to have more representatives because they've gotten a bigger population boom than that one.
Yeah.
They never really took that into account.
Okay.
So Hindus were always more, no matter what. Doesn't matter. Like, you might have had a huge population increase in Muslims or Jews or Christians. Didn't matter to the British, basically. Okay. And also, this is going to talk a lot of shit about the British. I mean, America's not any better, but we're going to talk a lot of shit about the Britons. About the Brits. We got time for that shit. So, 300 years pass. World War I happens. World War I, we have India is sending people to fight for the crown in World War I. I mean, they're kind of like, okay, cool. Sounds like fun. I don't know if you remember like numbers in World War I, a lot of motherfuckers died. That also includes people from India died fighting for a cause they had no idea what the fuck was happening. Mm-hmm. So when they came back, you already have someone like Gandhi who has this animosity. And now you have more people that are like, I lost my son, I lost my husband, I lost my nephew, my grandson, fighting for a cause that I had nothing. I had no skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So they're already feeling like, well, fuck this shit, fuck you, whores, blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't know if you remember what comes after World War I. You got World War II, the bigger war. What does England do? They ask India to send more people again.
Like they didn't learn the first time what was going to happen.
And you had a lot more revolts happen during this time in India.
Sure.
So, Gandhi again, own can of worms. You have Gandhi, and I can't remember the other gentleman's name, that were basically the Hindu majority. And during World War II, and even pre-World War II, they were like, look, we want our own state for India. India needs to be alone. And they were like, everybody gonna live together, we're all gonna be happy. Well, then you have people that are proponents for Pakistan that were like, no, we need to have a Muslim state as well.
Okay.
Because they saw how, and they assumed after seeing how England had ran India for so long, that they were never, even if they had more people, they were never going to get to actually have a say. Mm-hmm. They're not going to pass laws that benefit them. Right. Everything's going to be against them. Or it would never favor them as a whole.
At least they understood.
They did. And I was like, Britain taught them this. Like, England taught them what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And the way England basically went about causing all of this animosity toward your neighbor. Like, you know, we were neighbors, Jews and Christians. 0 fucks maybe given. Who knows? But in India, a Jew and a Christian living next door to each other, you're going to have animosity because England created it. They were like, if you are upset about each other, you're going to be less upset about us and the shit that we're doing.
Oh, that's smart. Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a phrase for it, and Britain did it a lot. Almost all colonizers did it. So like even in America, we pitted indigenous tribes against each other. And we still do that. So World War II ends 1945.
Okay.
Britain is cash strapped. They're like, fuck. It is costing a lot to not only just exist in England and keep our people happy, but to continue to send motherfuckers over to India and have people there because they're constantly having to control riots.
Sure.
And you have these protests that are happening. You also had...
the Queen's spending a ton of money.
Well, no, not the Queen yet, right? She's not the Queen yet. It's the King. Still the King, World War II.
Oh.
Just a few years. You have a revolt happen, I believe it was Calcutta, where they just started killing each other. A lot of people did. That's probably something we can talk about later. But in England literally was like, we're done. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back. They're like, you know what? We're going to appoint Lord Louis Mountbatten as Viceroy of India. You're going to figure this fucking problem out and get us the fuck out. Okay. So they're like, look.
Were they willing to give up their hold on India?
Oh, because they couldn't control it.
They couldn't afford to control it.
They could not afford.
Okay.
They at least they had the foresight to be like, you know, this is too much.
So they told Louis, like, go in and save as much as you can.
Figure out how we can get out peacefully without us losing face.
Okay.
And let them figure out like what you're gonna do. Because originally, again, you had Gandhi and his buddy for the Hindus that were like, just let us have the whole land. We'll figure it out. And
do you think that they were honorable in that they would have?
I don't think they ever would have been peaceful.
So, all right. Because that...
I think... So...
I'd have trouble believing
that from anyone. I don't believe it from a man. I also don't believe it from a woman.
But
I'm less likely to believe it from a man that they were going to have.
Taught you that that's a noble ideation, but it's not practical. And maybe they could have been the first one to figure it out, but what are the odds, right?
They could have. Maybe they were the first.
Maybe.
I highly doubt it. Because, I don't know, history.
Right.
So, Lord Mountbatten's like, shit, I gotta bring a friend over. So he brings a friend over to take a census. This is in June of 1947. Timeline-wise, India becomes its own free state in August of 1947.
So they do a census just like...
So, I can't remember homeboy's name. Doesn't really matter. We'll just call him homeboy.
All right,
so, Louis' homeboy. We'll just call him, I don't know, Simon.
All right.
So, Simon over here was tasked with, you are going to take a census. And in all those princely states, figure out, like, what is majority Hindu? What is majority Muslim?
Right.
Buddhists, Christians, Jews. And you're going to then also look at a map. And you're going to tell me where trains are. Okay. And you're going to try to divide this country up, or divide this land up, into multiple countries based off of religion. Again, just because you're, we live in San Antonio, doesn't mean I have the same ideology as someone who lives in Dallas. Okay. But you're going to put them together.
It's not the most horrible approach, though, to be like, okay, let's figure out who we're talking to and then what to say to them.
Yeah, but these are white men, so hold on, it gets worse. So, what in any place that is near the equator, June is fucking hot as shit.
Yeah.
July is also hot as shit.
Yep.
August is fucking hot as shit.
It's the worst.
Is the worst. He comes in and he's supposed to like be tasked with doing all this stuff. He decides, nah, it's too hot.
Okay, that's fair.
Simon over here says it's too hot.
I mean, I understand.
And he's like, nah, I'm gonna look at old shit.
Phone it in.
He phoned it in.
I love it.
I hate it. Like,
The fact that it's 105 degrees right now, like, I understand that.
I understand. Like, I understand being lazy, but you also, Britain really didn't think what was going to happen happens. They really thought that when we partition this land up, you will give each other time to move.
I can see how they sold it to them.
They sold it to themselves.
Yeah.
Britain sold it to themselves. So,
and they probably thought he did his job, which he did not do.
Right. And it's like, again, hindsight's 2020. Homeboy didn't do his fucking job. And he phoned it in looking at, trains, but he didn't include any new train tracks that had been laid out.
That's what I was thinking about that point. They're probably building the shit out of some railroads, right?
Yes. So you have multiple railroads talking about, natural geographics. Like, we don't want to cut up a river, make it look all crazy on a map. Find a natural geographic boundary and make that a map. Or make that its own country. So, August 15th, 1947, India gets its independence. In that time, that's when it goes into effect. Leading up to that, Britain starts leaving.
Sure. Okay.
Now, they had let slip, as they should, hey, we're going to partition the country, or we're going to partition this continent, this area, this land. But they didn't give out what was happening. So a lot of people, they're like, well, we're going to do it based off of religion.
I don't understand how they had the right to do that. If they are backing out and they're done and they're independent, they did it 5 minutes before the bell?
Yeah. They're like, by the way.
They hit it in the contract of here's your independence, sign this and they'll read it?
That's kind of what it feels like.
All right.
I mean, if you're getting your independence, even if there's strings attached, you want your independence, right?
So you click, I read the terms and agreements.
Yes, it's just, you read it. You also, you knew that this was going to happen. So a lot of families preemptively sent children, women.
Why did they think it was going to happen?
Because the British government said we're going to partition, but they didn't give out where the land areas were going to be. They said it was going to be done by religion. So if you are a Hindu and you are living in what is now modern day Pakistan, you're like, shit, I got to get.
I should probably go before this.
I got to move.
Yeah.
So preemptively before that, probably in July, a lot of people started moving. It's hot as balls in July too. So you have them also doing temporary movements where they're like, hey,
I'm going to see how this plays out.
Because they also started seeing a lot of people were already getting attacked by other people. Like Hindus were being attacked by Muslims and Muslims were being attacked by Hindus.
That's a shame.
And this was preemptively, this has already started happening. You had a lot of this was happening in Punjab and also modern day Bangladesh. You had a lot of religious violence.
The only piece I think the episode probably got right is these people, the family that they have on the episode is we've lived here forever. This is my land.
Yes.
This is my birthright, and now
100%.
I have to go, and I don't want to go.
Yes.
So I'm going to fight for that shit.
Yes. 100% that is what happened.
Okay.
But there are people that started temporarily moving, but they may not have moved to the correct location because again, it was a mystery.
You're right.
You know what?
You're guessing.
It's like playing
so
Squid Game on that fucking ladder.
Or just pack your shit and leave it in the car. But
they didn't have cars.
They're just walking?
So, August 15th, they get independence. August 17th, 2 days after, England has, Britons have left, they had 7 casualties on their way out the door. 7.
I bet there's stories behind every one of them.
Oh, I'm sure. Somebody slipped on a tire. I don't know. Somebody slipped on some oil. But they only had 7 casualties on their way out. They considered it a huge success.
I mean, who's to say that's at all true, but okay. I don't believe anything they say at this point, but...
It's white men doing white men shit.
Success we lost and we retreated.
I mean, we had, that's the narrative that...
Success of a failure.
But that's the same narrative that, the U.S. kind of uses with Vietnam.
It sounds very bushy, too.
Again, this is the playbook of we fucked up.
Oh my god.
We fucked up, however.
I wonder if we learned that from the British Empire.
Well, I think it's colonialism 101. We fucked up, but we're gonna leave with honor. Figure that out.
Nature.
So, anyways, back to the story at hand.
Mm-hmm.
August 17th, it is revealed to everyone the fucking land, the lines. Like
so
what
was that like in the paper?
you got
Okay.
West Pakistan, you got East Pakistan. East Pakistan eventually becomes Bangladesh. And then you got India, right the fuck middle. Pakistan, East and West, is Muslim.
But why East and West? What's the difference?
Because Pakistan wanted its own country and they gave them two. So you have East Pakistan and West Pakistan. It's like having West Virginia and Virginia, but like West Virginia was where California is.
That's hard for me to grasp.
Yeah,
Sounds
I don't
like
understand.
Berlin. I'm thinking Berlin.
Yeah, but then you have East and West Berlin, but then in the middle you have the USSR. It doesn't make sense. No, that's why East Pakistan is now called Bangladesh.
Okay.
That's a whole other story. So, prior to the showing of this map in these lines, that also didn't necessarily make as much sense because you have these principality rulers, I won't call them kings, but they're going to lose their independence that they've had.
Super threatened, and they have resources, some of them probably.
Yes. And they're going to lose whatever sway they had because now you're going to have a whole new government set up. Okay. Anyone who may have worked for them or been high enough up may also now feel threatened by peasants, in a sense. Like, so you still have the caste system. And I think it becomes heightened after this.
But I get that they're like, we don't have to listen to you anymore.
Yes.
You don't want shit.
So basically by 1948, that's kind of the end of the migration. So this is the partition of India.
Christmas, we're moving. If we're going to move.
I say by January.
And if we're going to fight, we're going to fight.
Yes, by January.
Okay.
I say by January. So from middle of August, well, if you start moving from July to August, July to January. Mm-hmm. But when these people are moving, if you're moving by foot, like you got a little cart, you got your horse, you got whatever, you goats, whatever, you're moving from your ancestral homeland, you are also going to be met with roving bandits. People that just...
And the land grab.
It's not even the land grab. People are literally leaving their house empty, and they're also thinking, if my house is empty, there's going to be a house empty for me that I can take.
So you're just like, this is my house now?
Yeah.
Cool.
I could see that. Well, I mean, not cool, because
this is a nice house.
People started getting attacked on these roads while traveling, and they're getting attacked by people that are a different religion than them, or that also have been hired by these princely states that had these skills from World War I and World War II that the Brits had taught them to just be like, nah, you don't get to move through here peacefully. Boop, boop.
Yeah, and they have weapons.
And they have weapons because...
What's the language like? The language barriers? Is everyone at least able to communicate with each other?
I would say yes. Yeah, at least in some capacity, communication.
Not a lot of English speakers?
No, you're not going to have English. Okay. I would say if you are upper class in that caste system, then yes, you spoke English because you had to communicate with the British. Yeah. And a lot of people like Gandhi if you were high enough up and your family had the means, you sent them to England to go to school. And
there's no law out there helping these people. No. There's no one that's going to save you or your property or your life.
No. In this period of just 6 months, 1 up to 2 million people died.
That blows my mind.
This being over 70 years ago, there are people that are alive now that were children when this happened.
And you know why this grabbed me and why I wanted to do this one in dark? Because again, it's like when you hear casualties like that, you're thinking, well, because there were 2 invading armies.
There was no armies.
Exactly.
And this is a migration, too. This is the largest migration that we know of in the world.
No battlefields, nobody's in charge.
The battlefield was literally anyone everywhere. And not only were you killed if you were on the road on foot with your cart, with your family, you were also killed on trains. People would they would just arrive at the next station with corpses.
That's what I'm thinking. Where are these bodies? I know that's morbid, but that is a lot of bodies.
Well, so it gets worse.
And no one's going in behind. There's no law. There's no order.
There isn't. And that's the thing is that
1 million dead bodies.
There's nothing set up either for there to be the consequences of your own actions.
And I'm an ignorant American. But I'm thinking, even in this state alone, 1 million dead bodies laying around all over. This is crazy.
And the thing is that they're not all being killed by guns, right? Because they don't have that much ammunition left over from World War II. Yeah. So you start thinking about the other ways people were killed. There were also suicides. So in India,
sure, okay,
you had And I think even if this had happened in America or over in Europe, we had something like this where people were killing you just because of your religion, that a lot of women back in like the early 20th century and before had that sense of honor of you are not going to rape me.
God, I didn't even think about all the rapes.
Oh, hold on, this gets worse. So if you don't want to think about this, you probably just want to stop now. Just know that everything was bad. Everything is still as bad.
Yeah.
But so going into what actually happened, so you had women who, so they would commit suicide. They would jump into wells. So they would have nothing bad happen to them. Pregnant women would have their boobs chopped off. Why? Why do you think that they would have their boobs chopped? They
couldn't feed anything.
Exactly. Your babies would literally die in your arms.
Wow, that's a good point.
If you were pregnant,
That's new.
I've
never heard that one before.
They did this in genocide in like Rwanda too.
That's fresh to me.
I feel like that's a newer guerrilla war tactic that is horrible, where you are literally going to,
if you don't die from it in the first place.
Yeah, it's like if you don't die, I mean,
I don't know how you wouldn't die, but
like they would also cut pregnant women's bellies to take out the baby.
And then you're
gonna die. You're both gonna die. They would also.
So a lot of these casualties are probably men trying to defend their families.
No, I don't think it's men defending their families. I think a lot of this, like a lot of the casualties. So hold on, it gets worse. Just calm down.
Right.
So you have forced conversions. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you also had children that were abused, tortured, murdered,
kidnapped and brainwashed,
human traffic in a sense, because you also have those. Like, it doesn't have to be that much older. It can be like a 20-year-old man who sees like a 12-year-old girl. And even if they are the same religion, I bet you would happen that they kidnap them and force them to marry them. Because, I don't know, that's just life. So you also have this supposed death of a child. You also, a lot of the men were killed just because they're men. But what happened to the women, I think, is more atrocious. For the simple fact that when you think of war, you think that it's like a gentleman's game, right? And you would think that the Brits instilled that into that World War I, World War II. You don't kill civilians, you don't kill children, you don't kill women. Because they are not the ones fighting.
Well, at least Brits were like, at least not out in the open. This is frowned upon, don't do that. Yeah.
Right. But for this to happen in the 40s in India.
Where no one's looking.
So you have that in India where no one, like literally, as you said, no one is looking, no one is noticing.
Nobody cares.
And no one cares. Because again, Britain got out. Mm-hmm. They wiped their hands clean, like literally.
Unlike a war where they're like, hey man, help us out. Which side do you want to be on? Everyone's like, we don't care about what's going on in your country.
Exactly. And as post-World War II, it's only been 2 years. There's still going to be there's countries like Germany, Japan, China that are still reeling from what happened.
They're broke too.
Everybody's broke. The only country that kind of made it out with not being in shit is the U.S. and that we had nothing to do with this. For once. So those temporary moves that had happened before the map was released now become permanent, and these families probably never see each other again. Okay. And there's a lot of families in Pakistan or Bangladesh or India that have just been separated because you didn't have mass phones. You don't have a phone to text somebody. You fucking I think I know where you wound up, but also you have no idea where somebody wound up.
And you're sure as hell not going to go traveling because you know what happens to travelers.
Even so, thinking about it in a horrible also aspect, you have these Hindus and Muslims that are just fighting each other, right? Okay. Gandhi is Hindu. Gandhi dies because of a Hindu fanatic that did not like that he was trying to be like, hey, let's be cool. Let's stop trying to kill Muslims. If we don't kill them, they won't kill us. Let's show peace, harmony. Hindu fanatic said, fuck you, bitch, and killed him. Assassinated Gandhi.
I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. That was a list of things I don't know.
It's,
Hindu on Hindu crimes.
Well, religious crimes, when you have a zealot of any type, you're going to have issues.
Was he shot?
I believe so. Huh. He was shot by an assassin.
Learn new stuff? Oh.
I think it's assassin. Yeah, I would say shot.
And that's how long after this began?
1948. A year.
Okay.
He died a year after they gained independence. So he got to watch the independence happen. He didn't get to live much longer after it. I mean, again, can of worms with Gandhi. Yeah. However, we're 70 plus 80 years now, almost. Be 80 years in 2027. You still have fighting going on because of what Britain left. Mm-hmm. This has been a thing with colonialism, period, going forward, the 20th century into the 21st century. Anywhere that an invader has left, they have made these arbitrary lines. They put lines in the sand. They said, you're your own country. It happened in Africa. You have people that should not necessarily be told they have to rule together. So Pakistan and India have been fighting over Kashmir forever.
And they always will.
And they always will, because I don't think either one will let it be recognized as an independent state. Mm-hmm. Even though I think that might solve some issues. But if it's an independent state, then I think both of them would go and be like, who's ever going to be here first? So they're going to continue to kill each other over it.
Financially, that's going to hurt everybody.
It still is, too. So East Pakistan eventually becomes Bangladesh, just because ruling two separately over a huge land that it's not peaceful to travel through either. So map-wise, it becomes very, I don't know, it's what the white man does. They literally go in and they decide where these arbitrary lines are that make no sense. The U.S. did it with states when they had indigenous tribes already here that very much so would go back and forth. It wouldn't matter. Same thing with having these countries, so the U.S. and Mexico, you have migration for migrant farming and migrant work. Okay. And for India, basically, with that partition of India, I don't think anyone in England really thought they were going to have bloodshed after.
I want to believe that.
I want to believe that they intentionally, this was not intentional whatsoever.
Okay.
But I just, looking at the history, looking up to it, I think that the writing was on the wall that it was going to happen if they didn't help and stay during that migration period. They allowed, I think that they allowed, to enforce, not even to enforce, but to keep the peace.
The same thing would happen.
But they also would have lost a shit ton of British soldiers as well as citizens. For what? And I think that that's probably why England said, nah, bro, we ain't going to stay. We ain't going to help you. So you have all these atrocities and they're, this isn't that long ago. It's just like if you ask somebody about Jim Crow laws in the U.S., it's still impactful because there are probably families that have never connected that also had no idea if someone died or didn't die during that transition. And they got stuck. Maybe they got stuck somewhere they didn't want to be. So all these refugees that are trying to leave, and let's say they didn't make it. Okay. You then have all these refugees and these huge population booms in cities like Delhi.
Sure.
That now have all these refugees, and if they weren't, let's say that they weren't well off, they were middle of the road. We'll call it like middle class America. They weren't in a low caste, they weren't in a high caste. Middle of the road. They then become a refugee and you become the lowest of the low because you are not from there. You don't know anyone, you don't have a job, and now you have all these extra people. Again, refugees. They're your own, it would be saying like your own countrymen. But they are now left in these cities. And I think that caused a lot of disparity between economic classes in India post-partition.
And I can see the conversion piece that they're like, let's just pretend to do this. We gotta live.
Whether you were forced to convert or if you're practicing in fucking silence like a Jew during the Holocaust. So I did see comparisons to this being like the Holocaust. Yeah. However, in the Holocaust, you were not forced to convert to Christianity because the Nazis didn't want religion, period.
Yeah.
So you were just killed for being a Jew. But people, again, were just killed because they were Muslim or they were Hindu or they were Sikh or they were Buddhist, whatever it may be. And the thing is that it was Muslims trying to leave most of India because they had the most to move. Okay. Spread out the most in India. They needed to move to either East or West Pakistan. They weren't given enough time, I think, for a peaceful transition move. Because they also didn't know where those lines were going to be. So if you thought you'd move far enough west and you did it.
That's true. You just keep walking.
Yeah. Or let's say you did it a few months before because, again, the whole goal was that England would leave in August of 1948. They left a whole year earlier. So they knew it was going to happen. They went in, I think, in 1946 into 1945 with the idea they are going to leave India. How are we going to do it? What's going to happen?
Man, could you even imagine, I settled. All right, I'm done. We moved. And then they're like, oh, by the way, you didn't move enough?
And that's over there? You got to go an extra 50 miles.
Holy shit.
And you'd already set up, let's say that you were a great farmer and you found a decent land you had, paid, let's say you even paid for it. Now what the fuck are you going to do?
No.
You're fucked.
There's no honor at all in any of the transactions, and
no,
there's no sign saying, this is the border. That's crazy.
It is.
So I guess the big cities would have been maybe safer in that respect, that they know where they belong to.
You may not have known where officially it went, but you knew that it was going to be either, like, Delhi was going to be Hindu.
Sure.
And you knew that Punjab, I think, was Muslim.
And if you're going to be a homeless nomad, that's the place to do it, not nowhere.
Right. And you're probably a little bit safer in numbers being in a bigger city.
Sure, yeah.
Any other lingering questions, comments about this subject?
So when did this just fizzled out the next year?
Yep.
And people just accepted their fate and patched it up?
I wouldn't even say that they patched it up because, again, you're still, Kashmir was like, nah, I don't want to really be a part of Pakistan.
Okay.
Because the Hindus that live there were like, oh, no, we want to be part of India. So it's always been a fight over that.
Okay.
You then eventually have East Pakistan that becomes Bangladesh in the 70s.
But they kept the border the same?
I believe the border was kept the
So
same.
the original is pretty much still there.
Yeah, probably.
And nobody could go back at this point and like claim the rights to land that they had lost during this.
I don't think that the Indian government has ever thought.
Recognize any of that.
Because also, you had these princely rulers that no longer were ruling that lost a lot of shit during this.
And that's why, that's another comparison to Nazi Germany to me, is like all of that property and the wealth and the gold and the pieces of art and they were just dispersed and someone stole them and now they're out there in the world and never got traced back.
No, because those princely rulers had still a shit ton of money.
They were able to defend it for long enough to keep it.
I think so. They may have lost a little bit of wealth, but they were
some fortresses that were pretty,
they were up there, but they were still up there in that caste system too. So they were still getting, certain respect. Whether they earned it or deserved it is a different story.
I mean, I guess you're not defending it against the army, like.
Yeah, they also paid for people that had been in World War I and World War II that had these fighting know-how to defend them and also to attack. Mm-hmm.
So within a year span, start to end.
Yeah, but within like 6 months, though, you have 1 to 2 million people dead. And I agree with you, the fact that we didn't learn about this is crazy, but also post-World War II, we go immediately into talking about the Cold War and Soviets in U.S. history. And world history just seems like a joke now when you start actually thinking about the whole world, because we don't talk about, when Europe finally all leaves Africa too.
We were all so self-centered until Korea. Like, there's a gap.
Korea is like 10 years later, not even 10. But Korea, it was all because of commies. Everything that the U.S. did post-World War II was really commies. So
since America had no threat by any of this, they just were like, this is not important to us because we're not worried about it.
Yes. I would say that America didn't become world police till probably the 80s. They took that mantra on during Vietnam for sure. Because of the communism.
Patriotism went wild.
In the 80s. I would say 80s, 90s.
I feel you there.
But also, we started meddling more in other governments and affairs, but mostly that was in the Americas, which was our sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully it wasn't all just depressing about the partition of India. And it is important. It's important history that I didn't know much about at all until I started researching this. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you bringing this up, Trisha.
Yeah, thank you for teaching me more about it.
You're welcome. Well, thanks again for joining me on another episode of But Have You Heard About? This is Courtney.
And Trisha.
And we hope you have a wonderful day, evening, morning, whatever it may be. Have a good one. Bye.